3 different debt limit scenarios since there's so many developing. So off the top, Senator Mitch McConnell has proposed for Republicans to either support a short-term hike in the debt limit through December, or to support a expedited reconciliation process where Democrats would vote to hike it long-term. What's the White House response to that? Is there support for either of those from the president? And then I was hoping to get clarification on something the president said yesterday. He seemed to suggest that he would support a carve-out in the filibuster if all else fails to hike the debt limit. Is that where he stands? Would he be open to that?
Well, right now, and perhaps this is the awkwardness of 4:15 while people are still meeting on the Hill, right now Democratic members are meeting on the Hill to discuss options on the path forward. I think Republican members may also be meeting or discussing among themselves. My understanding at the point I walked out here is that there's been no formal offer made. A press release is not a formal offer. And regardless, even the scant details that have been reported present more complicated, more difficult options than the one that is quite obvious in the president's view and is in front of the faces of every member up on the Hill. We could get this done today. We don't need to kick the can. We don't need to go through a cumbersome process that every day brings additional risks. So they're discussing up there. We'll obviously be in close touch with them, as we will continue to be, and we'll see where we are at the end of today.
And then one foreign policy question. Does the White House have a position yet on the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which passed unanimously in the Senate? And just broadly in that same context, how do you respond to the criticism from Senator Rubio and some Republicans that the administration is sort of letting Beijing have some advantage on human rights abuses to try to win over their cooperation on climate issues?
Well, we would absolutely dispute that notion. Unlike the former president, this president has spoken out against human rights abuses, has raised his concerns about human rights abuses directly with President Xi, and we have done that at every level from our national security team. In terms of the legislation, obviously we have spoken out about our concerns of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and I would also note that the president also led an effort to have coordination on the international stage to address this issue, unlike his predecessors, but I'd have to talk to our legislative team about specific views on the piece of legislation. I know I spoke to it briefly last week, but I'll come back to you with that. Go ahead, Steve.
Jake Sullivan reached a deal with the Chinese today for President Biden and President Xi to have a virtual summit before the end of the year. Do you see this happening around the G20 summit? And what's the advantage of them seeing each other face to face?
Well, as I understand it, what came out of the discussions was an agreement to continue dialogue at a very high level. So what we've said, of course, and we continue to believe, is that leader-level engagement is an important part of our effort to responsibly manage the competition with China, especially given the coalescing of power in Chinese leadership. We're still working through what that would look like, when, and of course the final details, so we don't quite have them yet.